Jenna Lee.
And I'm Greg Jarrett in for John Scott. We're awaiting now an update from leaders in Charlotte, North Carolina, set to begin any moment at a news conference. There you see the podium and the flags, all of this coming after a mostly peaceful night on the city's streets as pressure mounts on police to release that body cam and or dash cam footage of the night Keith Lamont Scott was shot and killed. Well, that was the scene. Protesters marching in the streets demanding that the Charlotte Police Chief, Kara Putney, make that videotape public. Scott's family, after viewing the tape, also calling for its release. Last night on the Kelly File, Chief Putney said this about the family's request.
Ultimately, that is a factor in whether or not we release, but ultimately, right now I don't have any authority to do so. It is in the hands of the State Bureau of Investigations. They're going to do an independent investigation in there. I tell you, looking at it from all angles, I think that is probably the better option right now. And we'll see what they find based on their examinations of the facts.
An attorney for Scott's family says the video shows no definitive evidence that Scott was holding a weapon. They say he was holding a book. Police say it was a gun. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, Officer Betty Shelby has been charged with first-degree manslaughter in the shooting death of Terrence Crutcher, who was unarmed. Shelby's attorney claims Crutcher was not obeying her commands, and Shelby opened fire when he began to reach into his car window. These two shootings and subsequent protests have become an issue on the campaign trail, with both candidates reacting. We're going to get to that in a minute. But first, Rick Leventhal is live in Charlotte with the very latest from there. Rick?
And Jenna, we're waiting for a news conference with city and county leaders to begin any minute now, and we'll try to take you to that live when it happens. In the meantime, night 3 of protests here in Charlotte, much more peaceful than the past 2 nights. We didn't see the looting or the violence that we saw before, thanks in large part, many believe, to the hundreds of National Guard troops and state police troopers who were brought in to help Charlotte police keep the peace here on the downtown streets. For the most part, these authorities allowed the group of perhaps 700 demonstrators to march through the streets. But there was tear gas used at one point when a smaller group tried to block traffic on Highway I-277, and 2 officers were actually hurt overnight when they were sprayed by some kind of chemical agent. As you reported, many in the crowd were chanting, "Release the tape," and "We want the tape," referring to the police body cam and dash cam footage of the shooting of Keith Lamont Scott on Tuesday afternoon. And late yesterday, Scott's family was shown that footage, and then their attorney released a statement which reads in part, "When told to exit his vehicle, Mr. Scott did so in a very calm, non-aggressive manner. While police did give him several commands, he did not aggressively approach them or raise his hands at members of law enforcement at any time. It is impossible," they say, "to discern from the videos what, if anything, Mr. Scott is holding in his hands. When he was shot and killed, Mr. Scott's hands were by his side, and he was slowly walking backwards," according to the family. Of course, according to the police chief, Scott was holding a gun, and in his opinion, the shooting was justified, Jenna.
Very interesting, Rick. We have 2 very different descriptions. Back to Rick Leventhal on the ground there as news warrants. We'll, of course, take you to the press conference that Rick also mentioned. That's going to get started, we believe, momentarily. In the meantime, we're going to turn to a little politics, because that's where we're at right now, the timing of all of this, and very different reactions to the shootings and the violent protests in Charlotte from the presidential candidates. Donald Trump stepping up his law and order message.
We need safety. We're going to make America safe again. The rioting in our streets is a threat to all peaceful citizens, and it must be ended, and ended now.
Hillary Clinton focusing on the shooting themselves.
There is still much we don't know about what happened in both incidents, but we do know that we have 2 more names to add to a list of African Americans killed by police officers in these encounters. It's unbearable, and it needs to become intolerable.
Glenn Hall is a U.S. News editor for the Wall Street Journal. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard and a Fox News contributor. So it feels a little shallow to talk about politics at a time like this, because there's such big issues, but we are electing the next leader of our country. So it is appropriate, I believe, to talk about it, Steve, and some of the strategy that we're seeing from both candidates. The Washington Post says this about Donald Trump today, that his his jumping into the deep end, if you will, of this issue threatens to antagonize centrists that are likely to decide the election. Do you believe that's the case?
I don't, actually. I think what we saw from Donald Trump is in effect doubling down on his law and order strategy, and I'm not sure that it works against him. I mean, he's called for now nationwide stop and frisk. You saw in the clip that you just played, he's speaking directly about strength and about law and order. And I think when you hear those words against the backdrop of the kind of videos that you're seeing night after night, when you have these protesters and rioters who are assaulting passersby, kicking a homeless man off of a chair, that's going to be a message that I think resonates with a lot of voters, including some centrists.
Interesting. In an article in Bloomberg today, Glenn, the writer says that she believes that this could be a game changer in the state of North Carolina in Trump's favor because it will motivate white voters to turn out for Donald Trump, and that's part of who he needs in that state. Do you see this incident having such an impact on the election 40 plus days away?
Well, certainly the messages are very starkly different between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump has been trying to take his law and order message into a different context lately by saying, this applies also to the minority communities so they can live in safe America, just like the rest of America. And he also has been talking about the need to help, making a distinction between those who need help and who've been ignored by politicians in economic downturns and those who are the bad apples, the drug dealers and the violent ones. And he sees a difference between those things. These messages may help chip away at some of the support Hillary Clinton has had in those groups, but also bolster those who may have been on the fence about Donald Trump because they come across now as a much more reasonable approach, balancing those two things between law and order for everyone and the need to take care of those who are outside of the normal sort of growth that the country has seen.
Of course, anything can happen in the next several weeks. We see these news events kind of come out of an unexpected area of the country in a key battleground state, Steve, and so here we are again, 40 days. A lot can change in 40 days as well.
Absolutely, no question about it. Look, I think we should assume that we will see some significant external event between now and November 8th, and that the way that each candidate handles that event will in some way or another help determine the outcome of the election. We've seen this in elections past. Remember George W. Bush's DUI in 2000, in the year 2000. In 2004, you had a series of stories that the New York Times wrote about this Al-Qaqa weapons depot that dominated coverage going into that election. In 2008, of course, there was the economic collapse. You've seen this again and again and again, and I think we're likely to see something similar between now and November 8th.
We're watching Charlotte, North Carolina, where we see the mayor stepping to the podium, and she's expected to make a few remarks along with the police chief. We expect there have been some news items each day that we listened in on these news conferences, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now.
Federal partners for being here with us as well. Last night in Charlotte, was what a lawful demonstration looks like. I want to say I appreciate the efforts of all of our law enforcement officers, both local and state, and I want to thank them for the professionalism that they have demonstrated. I was out on the streets last night listening to folks who were there and was grateful to see people voicing their opinions peacefully. I was also encouraged to see acts of gratitude and acts of positive personal interaction between demonstrators and our men and women in uniform. However, we continue to maintain our level of resources, and we are in preparations for the weekend ahead. We're thankful for the support of our business community as we work to return to a normal business schedule. Our uptown area is largely open for business, and we are working to return to normalcy. Last night, I signed a citywide curfew that is in effect between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. This curfew is a tool that allows us to adjust enforcement at the direction of our law enforcement officials. Our Corporate Communications Division has compiled a list of frequently asked questions And I would direct people to the City of Charlotte website, charlottenc.gov, as well as to watch our Twitter feed at CLTGov to continue to see more information on the frequently asked questions about the curfew. I'll go over just a few of those. We have gotten several questions about what does it actually mean to have the curfew in place. One of the questions are schools, daycares, etc. exempt from this curfew. Travel for services necessary to sustain the well-being of citizens or their families are exempt from the curfew. That would be daycares and schools. Some of those do open before 6 a.m. Another frequently asked question, how will the curfew impact businesses such as restaurants and bars that are open after midnight? The curfew restricts travel for non-exempt purposes within the City of Charlotte from midnight to 6 a.m. Patrons who leave establishments such as bars and restaurants will be impacted if they need to travel on the roadways during those curfew hours. Bars and restaurants will be closing at midnight. There are other frequently asked questions. Again, I would direct people to the website and to our Twitter feed. We'll continue to get those questions answered as people adjust to what a curfew means. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our Chief of Police, Chief Kerr Putney.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. I'd like to go over some of the details concerning last night's demonstrations that were, for the most part, peaceful, very much so. There were a couple of issues that we need to address, and I'm going to give you kind of a timeline, a sequence of events. At approximately 8:30, a group of protesters started to block the streets at the square, Trade and Tryon. At approximately 8:45, we saw some protesters within the group, one of the groups there at Ramir Bearden Park, who were beginning to put on gas masks. At 8:52, we got intelligence through our intel unit that there was a violent group coming out of South Carolina coming up here to join in the protest. These factors and a few others influenced my decision to seek approval for the curfew, and that was at 9 o'clock p.m. to be in effect starting at midnight and going, as the mayor said, to 6 in the morning. At 10:15, a civil emergency unit had to be deployed to maintain order as protesters continued to block streets. At 10:40, Interstate 277 was shut down, and we deployed CEU, Civil Emergency Unit, to move the crowd out of the street and regain order. That process took about 15 minutes, which is a lot more timely than we've had in the past. At 10:46, a city building on Church Street at Moorhead was reported to be vandalized, in the process of being so. So we responded to that location. At midnight, the curfew went into effect. A couple things about the curfew, one of which is it is a tool. It is a tool in the tool belt to help us maintain order. It gives us discretion. So employing that curfew, I do have the discretion to use some discernment and judgment in how we implement or enforce that. Meaning, as long as people are being peaceful, and for the most part they were, I don't have to be the aggressive party, creating a sense of disorder from our part, creating some tension that I wanted to, and our officers wanted to de-escalate. So that was our approach. We continued to facilitate the protesting throughout the night, and by 1:45 this morning, the protesting had subsided, and the groups had begun to dissipate significantly. Overall, we had one officer who was treated for a minor hand injury, 2 who were treated after being sprayed with some chemical agent by some protesters. 1 National Guard member was treated by medic for a minor injury. We had one civilian that was transported by medic, but was not related to the protest itself. We had a total of 3 arrests: restrict, obstruct, delay, failure to disperse, one for carrying a concealed weapon, and a curfew violation. I have to highlight a little bit of the work, though. Our investigations were being conducted from the previous night, where we had quite a bit of damage. What I saw was humbling, impressive work. Our officers were sacrificing their own safety to protect our city. And I can't say how humbled I am by that. Just great work. At 7 a.m., just today, another example of the follow-up work and the good investigative work. Our Violent Criminal Apprehension Team, VCAT, just apprehended Raekwon Borum, and we'll give you more information on that, who is the suspect in the murder of Mr. Justin Carr, which happened on Trade Street, there near the Omni. He was shot and killed, as you know, during the demonstration Wednesday night. And our crime scene investigators and our homicide detectives were able to use a lot of footage. Our real-time crime center was able to supply footage from cameras that helped us solve that case. Just a tremendous amount of good detective work there. Currently, we're still conducting the interview as the investigation continues, but we already have established probable cause and made that arrest. We've also identified several other suspects involved in property-related crimes the night before. And again, I can't say enough the impact that we've had with the camera footage that covers the city that allows us to piece together some of these cases. We have also posted a number of photos of additional suspects, and we ask the public to do likewise. If you have any evidence that can help us resolve and solve some of the outstanding cases that we're looking to resolve, we ask you to do so. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our partners. As always, the Charlotte Fire Department. We also have Medic, who's always a good partner. We have the National Guard, the State Highway Patrol, as well as our local Mecklenburg Sheriff's Office. We could not ensure the safety of our jurisdiction without their support. And again, I just want to underscore the hard work of our men and women, of our partner agencies, and our police department. They continue to do good work. I am also very encouraged by the manner in which the First Amendment was exercised last night. We're most appreciative to that. And I can tell you personally, I have a great deal of empathy for, or appreciation for the empathy and professionalism displayed by our heroes. I continue to be marveled by their efforts and their work. Lastly, and unfortunately, maybe for you, but not so much for me, this will be the final case update that I can give you regarding the officer-involved shooting of Mr. Scott. Currently, it has officially been turned over, as you all are aware, to the State Bureau of Investigations for an independent investigative process. They will be the entity that's responsible for updating any cases and disseminating information and releasing any information. A thorough investigation relies on multiple factors, and I can tell you one piece of evidence will never, ever make a good case. I know the expectation that video footage can be the panacea, and I can tell you that is not quite the case. There are a lot of other factors that have to support and corroborate even what you might visually see. But the process is painstakingly slow sometimes, so I ask for your continued patience as the State Bureau of Investigations conducts their thorough investigation, because it's going to take them some time to piece together everything that has happened. And what I can tell you is I have confidence in that process, and I hope our fellow community members will allow for that thorough investigation. Again, last thing I want to say is I'm still optimistic. I'm still proud of our city. I'm still proud of our community, and I'm humbled and very proud of the work that our CMPD officers and our law enforcement partners continue to work to make us a safe city that our community deserves. Thank you.
Good morning again. I'm Willie Ratchford with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Community Relations Committee, and I want to acknowledge up front that these are and continue to be difficult times for all of us. Together, our community has always worked tirelessly to address concerns surrounding police and police community relations. It is critical that we remain diligent and continue to engage in productive dialogue, sharing and respecting diverse perspectives. We must continue to do what is right based on factual information, not speculation, not innuendo, or rumor. Let's continue to work together to seek the truth and find the mutual solutions that will foster trust and strengthen us as a community. We as a community need to navigate through this together, and I believe that we will. We must remember that we cannot control what others might think, say, or do. However, we do control how we might react to them. The Community Relations Committee is currently working with the Community Building Initiative and faith-based organizations to create opportunities and safe spaces for dialogue for convened and intact groups. We are here as a resource to our community. Anyone interested in participating in a facilitated dialogue can do so by contacting Diane English at the Community Building Initiative at 704-333-2595, or they might contact me at 704.
The latest out of Charlotte, North Carolina, as we continue to watch the news from that city. They're just a community leader talking to the press and to the local population, but we also heard from the mayor and the police chief as well. We're going to continue to monitor that news conference in case any questions are asked, but here's the two big headlines. One is there will be a curfew tonight in the city of Charlotte from midnight to 6 a.m. Remember yesterday at this time, there was the decision there was no need for a curfew, and yesterday evening that changed. So there will be a curfew this Friday night from midnight until 6 o'clock. Also from the police chief, just want to reiterate this other big headline that officially the investigation into this police shooting has been turned over to the State Bureau of Investigations for an independent investigation. So it's out of the police chief's hands. It's into the officials for the state. And as he mentioned, it may be a while before we have a full picture as to what actually transpired that very day, where an officer shot a man. The officer said that the man had a gun. The man's family says he had a book. We will try to find out the facts of that case, and hopefully sometime soon, although we can't be too sure. Again, we'll monitor that news conference. I see the mayor speaking yet again. If there's any news that comes out of it, we'll bring that to you. In the meantime, I want to bring back in Glenn Hall, U.S. News editor for the Wall Street Journal, and Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Steve, as I was listening to this news conference and considering the climate, you have local politics, we have national politics. The political climate of our country is what it is. There's a lot of different adjectives you could use to describe it, but it is what it is. Do you think the politics of the moment are actually preventing a viable solution in some of these communities?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the politics don't make things easier, but I think if there was an easy solution, we would have found one right now. I mean, I do think it's the case that you have, in many instances, groups talking past one another, whether you're talking about the police, whether you're talking about, minorities and the families of the victims of these shootings. You have a conversation that's not really a conversation because people aren't engaged. You have too many times people just making stands. And to the extent that politics is playing a role in that, and I think it is, it's not helpful.
Yeah, and then we also don't have the facts. And here we're going to have to wait for even longer time for the facts, to see a video, to have an understanding of exactly what potentially happened. Glenn, here we are a couple days away from the first debate. Race, security, that may very well be a topic we'll see at the debate. It must be discussed, but yet I wonder if it just adds to the tension without adding a solution.
Yeah, both of the candidates are trying to find the right message and the right tone to strike here, recognizing that there's that balance between law and order and also the needs of the community and the rights of the communities. And, you know, both of these candidates also want to reassure their potential voting bases that they have the right approach, and they want to maintain, you know, the vote of the black vote, the Hispanic vote, the minority vote, but also to appeal to the white voters, that will be significant portions of their support on both sides. So there's a lot at stake for them, and I'm certain that we'll be hearing a lot more on this topic. It's something that has been with us for a long time in America, and it remains unresolved, as we've just been discussing. People in this election will be looking for someone with the right answers.
You know, Joe Tribby once told me, as we were awaiting the results for the 2012 election, all elections come down to a few basic questions. Can I get a job? And am I safe? And these seem to be the themes that are coming up as we get closer to Election Day. Steve, Glenn, thank you very much. Great to have you both.
More than 15 years after 9/11, Congress says the families of the victims can sue the home country of some of the terrorists, while the White House and others think that is a bad idea. And Donald Trump insisting the news media is biased against him. And what a new analysis found, and what our media panel thinks about negative coverage of both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. The father of Ahmed Rahami speaking out now about his son changed after a trip overseas. The younger Rahami accused of planting bombs around New York City and New Jersey, one of them exploding last Saturday night in New York City's Chelsea neighborhood, leaving nearly 30 people injured. Rahami's father saying his son's personality changed after he returned from a trip to Afghanistan and Pakistan in 2013, and that he became, quote, bad. He says he told the FBI about his concerns about the son, but doesn't think the agency took any action against him.
Well, a computer hacker from Kosovo faces 25 years behind bars today after he gave ISIS the names of more than 1,000 U.S. government and military personnel. A judge is expected to sentence the 20-year-old in federal court today. Our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, is in Washington with the latest. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Jenna. The case of Ardit Faritsi is so important because for the first time it showed the powerful intersection between hackers working for the Islamic State and the targeting of U.S. government employees as well as military families. Faritsi, who is an ethnic Albanian, pled guilty in June to providing material support to a terrorist organization. The 20-year-old hacked into an online retailer and for months sifted through data in order to cull information about 1,000 federal workers. According to investigators, Faritsi turned the information over to a British-born ISIS propagandist, Junaid Hussain, who was based in Syria, and shared the information widely among the Islamic State followers through the self-described Islamic State Hacking Division. The so-called ISIS kill lists were posted online with the names, home addresses, and contact information of American citizens. These kill lists began showing up in 2014 and 2015, and unfortunately, in a majority of cases, they included accurate information, with the military service branches telling their members to reduce their online profiles and to report suspicious activity. A veteran FBI intelligence officer says that ISIS has accomplished through the digital jihad what al-Qaeda could not.
I see a trend. The trend being is you have compared to 9/11, before 9/11 you had cells, pocketed cells. Now you have pocketed lone actors that are receiving their orders through social media messaging, and they're also receiving instruction to do or carry out these attacks through sophisticated means or unsophisticated means.
Faritsi was scheduled to be in a Virginia court this morning, and quite frankly, we thought it would have wrapped up by now, but as soon as we get an update on the sentence, we'll bring it to you, Jenna.
We'll be curious about that, Catherine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump getting ready for Monday's big debate. Right now, we're checking out some new research by a Harvard professor that suggests the news media is biased against Hillary Clinton. Well, that analysis, Clinton has undergone, quote, substantially more negative news coverage throughout the campaign. Well, naturally, Donald Trump insists it's the other way around. Let's get to the bottom of it with our media panel. Judith Miller, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, author, and Fox News contributor. Lynn Sweet joins us, Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. All right, so Judith, I took a look at this Harvard study. The devil's in the details, and context is everything. It turns out that all of the negative stories were dominated by Hillary Clinton's email scandal, and 91% of those stories were negative. Well, of course they were. It's a scandal. There's nothing much positive to say about a scandal.
Actually, as I read that study, Greg, it said that 11% of the stories were actually devoted to the email scandal, and that 91%, only 11%.
Relative to the other stories, they're a smaller percentage.
Now, but look, the issue is, what is the tone of the stories that are about her, that are not straight news stories? And the finding that 91% of them are negative in tone gives Hillary Clinton, as opposed to Donald Trump, something legitimate to complain about. And I think that, you know, we've seen a woman who is more heavily scrutinized than anyone else.
A scandal that she wasn't indicted? That's the only thing positive I can think of.
No, the problem is there are only 4% of the stories about her that are devoted to her actual policies, what she believes, what